Here we go. Welcome to the second Beetcoin Dialogue. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Woody Tash, founder of Slow Money. I hope by now most of you have gone to the Beetcoin.org website and poked around. If you haven't, that's part of your call to action. You have to go poke around the site. And I do know that not everybody has, because for instance, Linda O'Malley, who I connected with the other day, had sent in an inquiry to the Slow Money website about possibly starting a 0% loan group in the greater Albany region. And we had quite a nice conversation, and then discovered that she hadn't really spent time on the Beetcoin.org website yet, which she did afterwards. So I know a bunch of you haven't. So please go to the Beetcoin.org website if you haven't, and spend enough time to poke around. There's lots of nooks and crannies there that are hopefully entertaining and informative and whatnot. In case some of you on this call don't know what Beetcoin is, it's our new crowdfunding platform through which we are seeking to generate a large number of small donations from across the land, and then we will get them as grants to local soil groups. SOIL stands for Slow Opportunities for Investing Locally, and these groups are making 0% loans. They're basically like community revolving, giving circle-y, small local groups that are making 0% loans to local farmers in their region. So once the money goes local, it stays local and just recirculates permanently locally. Obviously, this whole thing is described on the website, so please check it out if you haven't. Thank you all for joining. The idea for these dialogues is super simple. It's just to create a venue. We're going to do them twice a month for a while, see if that seems like too much, or I know it won't be not enough, but it could be too much. But we did our first one last month. There seemed to be some significant demand to do more often than once a month. So we're going to go to twice a month, the second Wednesday and the fourth Wednesday of every month. And each time we will feature a special guest. I'll introduce our special guest for this one in a sec. And that guest will make a presentation of 20 minutes, half hour-ish, whatever they feel moved to, but no more than a half hour. And then I may lob a few questions to them. I'll try to watch the chat room, put your questions in the chat room, and we'll just do our best. We've got 55 people on here. So, you know, I'll try to do my best. I have someone from Boulder looking over my shoulder in the chat room too, Suzanne Prendergast. So we'll do our best to see questions, but once we go open, once the presentation is finished, we'll just have open conversation. So don't stand on ceremony. You know, we're on Zoom and you can unmute yourself and you know, stay muted while the presentation is going. Obviously, I think you all know that by now. And then remember to unmute yourself if you want to talk afterwards. And hopefully we'll have a nice, robust conversation for a while. The formal part of this will go for at least 45 minutes, meaning Zoe Bradbury, who I'll introduce in a second, will do her thing. And then I'll have a brief conversation with her, and we'll just throw it open to everybody to have just hopefully a robust, wonderful conversation. And then in no case will we go longer than 1 hour, meaning if the conversation is roaring and we're going and everything, we're still going to end at 1 hour on the dot, just to be respectful of everyone's time and people kind of get to know that we're going to do that. But I will stay on afterwards if anybody wants to get more for any reason. You don't have to though. And I think that's enough of that kind of stuff. Our special guest for this Beetcoin Dialogue is Zoe Bradbury. Zoe, I didn't know who you were because you signed up as Zoe DeSura. And that's the first time anyway, that's a whole nother thing. We weren't sure whether to let you in or not. Zoe Bradbury is, how do I say this? A beautiful, heroic, slightly iconic, she doesn't know that I think she's iconic, example of a very successful, small organic farmer from Southern Oregon. She's a Stanford graduate. She was a Kellogg Food and Society Fellow, extremely smart, very accomplished, and is just a great example of, speaking personally, what I'd like to see a lot more of in this country. And I gather most of you on the call would probably feel the same way. Hopefully they'll feel the same way after you give your presentation, Zoe. So with no further ado, Zoe, take it away.
Okay, thank you, Woody. You're making me blush out here in Oregon. Hello, everyone. I'm Zoe, and I am located in Southern Oregon, on the Southern Oregon coast, actually, kind of at the very edge of the continent. And Woody has tasked me with telling a little bit about our farm, which has been in existence since 1998. I came onto the scene to join my family there in 2008. So it's been about 13 years of full on crazy farming and growing vegetables and making babies and rearing all kinds of things, plant and animal alike. So I think I'm going to launch us into the presentation. Is that fair, Woody, to jump right in?
Right. I forgot to tell people, Zoe has a PowerPoint that she's going to lead us through. So take it away.
Okay. All right. I'm going to share the screen. Let's see if we can get into it. All right. So our farm is called Valley Flora. And like I said, we're on the Southern Oregon coast. So here is a little aerial shot of our property. Out on the very horizon, you can see the Pacific Ocean, that blue stripe. And there's about a 2-mile coastal plain. And then you come up this little valley following Flores Creek. And we are the last little slice of bottomland before the valley closes in and becomes wooded canyon land. It's a very special little microclimate. We typically have 75-degree summers, pretty temperate. We can go year round. Winters aren't too cold. Summers aren't too hot. And it's a pretty special pocket because just 2 miles west, right out there at the beach, it's usually 20 degrees colder, howling north wind, hoodie sweatshirts tucked up over your head, and not a place that you can grow a tomato for sure. So we feel really lucky. The yellow line is sort of a rough outline of our property. And down there by the river, you can see some of our fields that are worked up in production. This photo is actually dated. So now across the road, the mirror image of that worked up land is also in production. So it puts the farm at about, it's 90 acres total, but that includes pasture and timber. So there's about 15 acres that are deer fenced for row crop production. And in that area, about 6 of that is worked up for annuals. So we also have, greenhouses and other infrastructure I'll get into in a minute. The farm is owned by my mom, Betsy, on the left there. She moved here in the early 70s. Both my sister and I were born there on the property and grew up there. I left when I was 16, went back east and started college early, ultimately then transferred to Stanford and finished my undergraduate there. Later got my master's degree in social change and community food systems. And then my sister, Abby, on the right, she went to Middlebury. She spent time on the East Coast as well. And then ultimately, basically that gravitational pull of a place so special as home drew both of us back. And she came back earlier. She started her business there on the farm growing salad greens in 1998. And then, like I said, I returned in 2008. And at that point, we sort of teamed up and had to figure out how we were going to go about this as a family, because we all wanted to be there. We all wanted to be farming. But we also wanted to still enjoy family dinner together on Sunday night. So we knew well that there were going to be a lot of challenges. So what we came up with was sort of an unusual structure where the 3 of us each run our own farm enterprises. So we have our own operations, we're our own bosses, and we all grow separate things. And then at the end of the day, we market all of our product collectively under the Valley Flora logo. So Valley Flora is the 4th enterprise, and it's basically just a distribution company. And what it allows us to do is, through QuickBooks, just keep track of what all of our individual sales are and pay ourselves accordingly. So no one has to keep track of hours. No one's anyone else's boss, and we can all sort of have our autonomy, but also our family harmony. And it's worked really, really well. It's been a good path. It wasn't the easiest thing to work out in the first couple of years, but I think hammered it out. And at this point, things have been flowing really smoothly for a number of years. So like I said, we all have our niches. This is Woody likes to refer to me as a hero. And there was a project through the local library this year where they had kids interview and then paint portraits of a local hero. And this was what they came up with for me. I was the token farmer. I think I look a little bit like a psychopath, but it's given us hours of gut-splitting laughter. This is my mom, Bets. She grows all the tomatoes, peppers, hothouse crops. Pretty much just her season happens at this crazy, intense summer moment, and then it's over and she gets back to all of her other projects the rest of the year. She's now 70 and still going strong. So she's been quite a role model in my life for sure. And this is my sister, Abby. She primarily grows the salad mix on the farm. She does a few other token crops as well, but she's sort of world famous around here for Abby's greens. And I do pretty much everything else. So the sort of largest slice of the pie and the most crop diversity. So we grow over 100 different crops on the farm. It's extremely biologically diverse. Everything from broccoli and carrots to grapes and cherry tomatoes and artichokes and asparagus, annuals and perennials both. We have a couple acres in orchard in addition to the 6 acres that are in annual production. So that yields fruit usually from June all the way until December. And then we have stuff in storage, primarily apples, that get us through the winter. The farm's infrastructure has been a work in progress, but is finally to the point after 13 years of investment where I really feel happy about all the systems we have going. This is our newest addition. This is a pretty high-tech greenhouse where we do all of our own propagation of our starts. And then this space also doubles as an awesome spot to cure all of our onions and winter squash in the fall. Unfortunately, it's located right next door to our pack out barn, which is pictured there. That's where our walk-in cooler is, our wash line, all of our dry storage. We're running on solar power. So a couple of years ago, through some awesome grants through USDA and the state of Oregon, we put a 13 kilowatt system on the roof of our barn, which now powers our irrigation pumps, our walk-in cooler, all of the greenhouse fans, freezers, lights, all of that. So it's a good feeling. I initially got into farming for a lot of ecological reasons, and to be able to take that leap in terms of renewable energy was a really satisfying step forward for us. So just as diverse as we are in the production realm, we're also very diverse in our marketing channels. We sell through 3 primary channels. One is our farm stand and U-Pick. This is on site at the farm and has become a bigger and bigger portion of the farm's sales since we started in 2009. So it used to just be sort of a little fraction. It was market style drop-in where people would come and line up and get their produce for the day. We would do it twice a week in the summers, once a week in the late fall and winters. Then COVID hit and we had to sort of evolve along with it and ended up going to an online sales platform called Local Line. So now actually most of our farm stand business is pre-order, pre-pack. People come and pick up their order, and then there's always some extra stuff available for drop-in shoppers. But it's been amazing. Honestly, the online sales thing will probably never go back because our sales at the farm stand doubled because of it. People, I think, just really liked knowing that their food was waiting for them up there and they could get what they wanted. And it's been a really positive evolution in the context of, a not so fun pandemic, but it's been a great solution for us. The U-Pick is probably the most profitable enterprise on the farm. People come flocking in the summer from June until the berries stop, usually in October. We basically can't grow enough strawberries, or won't grow enough strawberries for the amount of summer demand there is. And the reason I won't is just because we have a very specific crop rotation. And if too much of the farm gets put into strawberries, then the crop rotation gets out of balance and the diversity starts to wane. So I'm pretty strict about that, but it means it's a little bit competitive in the summer and sometimes causes some, little 4-year-old meltdowns when they show up and there's no more berries to pick. But part of the reason it is so profitable is that in all of the cost study analysis work we've done on the farm to really try to understand profitability, it's become apparent that 50% of the cost of production of pretty much any crop is in harvest and post-harvest handling of that crop. And so when we don't have to pick it and pack it, we save that 50%. So the U-pick actually for us ends up being a pretty great option. And we're in a great climate to grow great strawberries. We grow a variety called Seascape, and I just have to give a little shout out to John Brown, who's on this call today. He was the original strawberry farmer in Langlois when I was a kid, and he now lives in Montana. And I just want to thank him for showing me when I was a little girl that this was possible, because it's a huge part of my livelihood now. In addition to the farm stand and the U-pick, we do CSA, and the CSA really was a critical turning point for us financially. I got started in 2008, and in 2009, we started offering CSA shares. And that was a big turnaround, because up until that point, I'll probably get into this a little bit more later, but the financial aspect of starting up a farm was terrifying, and I was sort of living on the edge of barely making it for a couple of years. And once we started having CSA members commit upfront early in the spring with cash, it took away a lot of the credit issues that I was coming up against as I was trying to make investments in infrastructure and systems on the farm. So we grew from, I think, 50 members to 100 members really quickly within a couple of years. And now we've plateaued at 125. It just seems to be a good scale for us, in balance with our other market channels. We go from June through December for our main season, so a 28-week season. And then we also do a winter season from January through May, which is an every other week season, and ends up being a pretty awesome, diverse collection of food that we can put out. We had our first harvest week this week, and it was a very colorful share. So this is sort of a quick little snapshot of some of the baskets that we put out throughout the season, and it changes every week depending on what's at its peak on the farm. We also sell wholesale, so that probably our market channels are probably thirds at this point: third farm stand U-pick, third CSA, and then we sell to restaurants and stores and caterers locally. And all of that, all of our food pretty much stays within 45 miles of the farm. So we go as far north as Coos Bay and as far south as Gold Beach, up and down 101 here on the coast. And really the farm is scaled to that market. So we made a conscious choice early on that we did not want to be driving to Portland or crossing over to the Rogue Valley or some of the places where there's larger concentrations of population. We really felt like we'd rather be right there on the farm, and if possible at the swimming hole in our time off. So we just have scaled it so that our local market can absorb what we grow. And it's been great. The market has definitely expanded since we've been doing this. But for the most part, there's zero waste on the farm. And it's a good feeling knowing that all that food is ending up in local bellies. So a little bit about how we grow. We're a mixed power farm. So we rely on horses, humans, and diesel. And sorry about my very excited dog. My kids are just getting home from school. So we have tractors, but we also have draft horses. That's one of my passions. So the horses fill a really critical niche on the farm. They do things that no tractor can do, actually cultivating certain crops and getting all of our cover cropping done. And it's just a joy to work with them. They were definitely part of the vision when I was trying to picture what would that sustainable farm look like when I was daydreaming about it back in my early teens even. And I always had this image of that right there, horses and a sun hat and a big field of cover crop. So I've been working with horses since 2008. And like I said, they're really an ecological piece of the farm, but also a real passion piece of it. We kind of do everything we do on the farm revolves around cover cropping and building soil organic matter. So summer and winter, we have cover crops in the ground on the farm with the goal of just returning as much organic matter back to our ground as we possibly can. It's a whole nother job. It's one of the hats that I wear, and it's probably my favorite hat. If I could just grow cover crops and make a living doing it, I think I would. But these kinds of stands of cover crop are, for me, very symbolic and satisfying, because what you're looking at is not just a field of green, but it's habitat for beneficials on the farm. It's protection from erosion for our soil. It's food for all of the mycorrhizal fungi under there. It's just really the humming heart of the place. And I don't think we would be as successful in our cash crop production were it not for the amount of time and energy that we dedicate to this cover crop element. Compost is another big part of it. We make all of our own. We recycle a lot of our crop residue and then mix it with all of the horse manure. And usually that's enough to get most of the farm composted by the end of the season. So that's also part of the magic of the place. Reduced tillage is a big goal of ours. So we definitely use tractors and tillage, but we also try to use occultation or tarps wherever we can to try to, especially in the spring when it's wet and hard to get into the field, use that to knock back cover crops and get ground opened up without doing damage. And finally, I always feel like this picture just sort of sums up the whole thing for us, which is, my mom has this great saying that everything we do on the farm or in life should be 51% art, meaning that the aesthetic, the beauty of it all is really important and is a big driver for us. So when this praying mantis dropped onto this pile of rainbow carrots while I was washing them one day, I think this was my very first year actually farming. It was just sort of like the symbolic snapshot of it all, where we've got sort of this ecological, beneficial predator, the praying mantis, next to these beautiful rainbow carrots, very much creating a little moment of art as well. So yeah, the farm has come a very long way. I'll hop out of here for a sec. And like I was saying early on, that it wasn't without its fair share of challenges. So when I came back to the farm in 2008, I had just finished a stint working in the nonprofit world. And I specifically had been at EcoTrust in Portland, which is a triple bottom line organization. And I was working on their food and farms team, enjoying my work a lot. But also sort of struggling a little bit with wanting to be outside, wanting to be more involved directly in some of the farm work that I was advocating for. And then had this experience where I was pulled aside by their investment advisor, who basically said, it's time to talk about your retirement portfolio, and we're going to set up your 403B. And here's your options. And so he started showing me this portfolio, and I was just assuming, because I was working at EcoTrust, that we were talking about socially, environmentally responsible investment. And I asked him that, and he said, he looked at me funny, like, well, no, I mean, most people just want to get their highest return for their dollar and retire as well off as they can. And I was horrified, because here I was working side by side with all of these people who were putting in 80-hour weeks to save the world, and suddenly realized that they were invested in Exxon. And I thought, well, that's job security, I suppose, but it also just seems incredibly futile. So I asked what our other options were, and he I think he thought I was crazy, but got me enrolled in this socially, environmentally responsible 403B. But it was a real awakening for me in that moment to realize that this world, this nonprofit world that I, had a lot of faith in and was putting a lot of time in for, was fundamentally at root not being part of the solution. So when I finally left the nonprofit world and came back to the farm, I was penniless. I was a Kellogg Food Society fellow and had a small stipend for the 2 years that I was a fellow, which basically floated the farm as I started to get it off the ground. I had all kinds of benefits on my side. I was returning to family land, so I was, paying a lease for that land, but I wasn't trying to purchase land and shouldering a big heavy mortgage. I had all kinds of infrastructure I needed to invest in, and not a lot of funds to do it. And so I started looking around when I knew I needed to invest in an irrigation system my first season. Started looking for loan money from banks and from the Farm Service Agency through the USDA, and just sort of assumed I was going to be the poster child for that program, the FSA program, because it was a beginning farmer loan program, and found out that they wouldn't loan money to me because I was farming on leased land, and they didn't want to make loans on permanent improvements on leased land, even though it was family land. That wasn't good enough. And so I ended up financing my entire startup on a 0% credit card. And that was in 2008, before the big crash, when you could still, you were getting those offers in the mail every week. And so I went out on a limb, and I, at the risk of 18% interest when it came due in a year, I basically bought all of my irrigation and pack out shed and all of those huge expenses on that card. And I literally was able to pay it off the day it came due a year later, but not a moment sooner. And it was just this real awakening to think like, wow, this is what everyone's dealing with, unless you are independently wealthy somehow getting into this. But I mean, my scenario was hard, but it could be harder still if you were trying to access and buy land and afford all of that. So fast forward 13 years, here I am. The farm is profitable now. It's grossing about $75,000 an acre, which is great. It's supporting my mom and sister and I fully in our income. It also supports a crew of 4 people who are year round, not full time in the winter, but do work more than full time in the summer for sure. It's thriving. It's doing great. I don't have any complaints, other than sometimes it is hard to find help. The labor thing is tricky, but it's been a long road, and I sometimes lose sight, I think, of I forget what it was like. It's like labor, having a baby, you forget, and then you have another one and you remember, oh my God, that was really hard. What was I thinking? But at this point, we're more on cruise control. And so it's just been a real honor to sort of connect with Woody and be excited about what Beetcoin potentially has to offer to people like me 13 years ago, when I was trying to get this off the ground and searching wildly for money. And there wasn't crowdfunding at that point. The banks wanted 15% interest, and the USDA beginning farmer loan program wouldn't give me any. So I think resources like this are really, really critical if we want more farms like Valley Flora on the landscape and feeding more people. So I think I'll pass it back to you, Woody. I didn't really keep track of time, but I'm going to put it back in your court and take it from there.
You are right on the money. I mean, it's 7:32. That's East Coast time. I caught 3 things there that I couldn't fail but like, oh, yeah, one was you talked about how the critical role of the CSA, how pivotal that was at a certain moment. And I often refer to slow money in general, the spirit of slow money in general, of which Beetcoin and the 0% loan groups are a part, as the CSA of investing, meaning the spirit of it is groups of people coming together locally to do something, to get money flowing differently to the local farms and local food systems, right? So it's the same spirit. And then also your comment about your kind of your little, if I have to be careful about overusing the phrase aha moment, unfortunately now, but your little aha moment when you're working at EcoTrust and the thing about your retirement account came up. So what I'm just flagging as a little thing, just like throwing a dart at it, is the whole thing about the boundary between for-profit and nonprofit and all the kind of crazy cultural schizophrenia that happens as we are struggling with that boundary and trying to find more holistic approaches. And of course, if you think about what we're trying to do with Beetcoin and, you know, donations and 0% loans and whatnot, we're trying to solve some little part of that, you know, heal some little part of that. Then the last thing is, just to say the obvious, yeah, so our local soil groups, our local 0% loan groups, we're the 0% loan, but without the 18% in the second year.
Yeah.
So just to be a little more explicit, most of the groups, there are 5 groups now doing 0% loans, 4 in Colorado and 1 in Virginia. I believe our friend Io is on from Nigeria right now. I saw him come in, and I don't know what time it is there. I think it's like 2 in the morning or 3 in the morning there or something. He's wondering about starting a 0% loan soil group in Nigeria. Most of our loans in the 5 groups that are doing it, we don't have one prescription yet, but they've tended to become 4-year loans, no payments in the first year, nothing in the second year until the end of the second year, then 20%, then 30% at the end of the third year, and the remaining 50% at the end of the fourth year. So it's back-ended over 4 years. It just kind of felt like a comfortable place where we kind of landed in the Boulder group. So we're kind of feeling our way on, is that it? Or, you know, could we go 5 years? What, you know, we're trying to make it as easy as possible for the farmer to access modest amounts of capital that are needed for some infrastructure or other, you know, piece of equipment or whatever they need it for, and make it as comfortable for them to pay it back as possible. Okay, so I just wanted to, now one thing before we throw it open to questions, because I have seen a few questions in the chat room. You said 75,000 an acre, but just clarify that, because that's not, I think you meant row crop. I think you mean on the row cropped stuff. So just clarify a little bit on that, and just remind people again, go back, because I think you went over that kind of fast in the presentation. Remind people how many acres, how much of it is row cropped, how much orchards, et cetera.
Yep. So there's 6 acres in annual, well, dedicated to annual production, but usually only 4.5 to 5 of that is in cash crop production, because we keep some of our ground in fallow or cover crop every year. So I would say 4.5 to 5 acres is what is generating the income. And the farm is, you know, grossing 350,000 or so at this point. So
I hope a lot of people on the call are kind of going, holy cow. I mean, this is, think about the US, the 800 or 900 million acres that are in agriculture in the US. And I should know this. I think about 100 million of that is GMO corn, some number like that. And that is in one, so that acreage is in one crop, and it's grossing maybe $500 or $800 a year or whatever, depending whatever the price of corn is. So think about that, 500, 800. If it's in another crop, maybe it could be $1,000 an acre versus $75,000 an acre from diversified, you know, organic production. All right, just wrap your head around that, everybody. Which leads to one of the questions I noticed in the chat room, which was about labor. Someone said, someone asked you how many workers you have. You touched on it, but just go back there. And then someone also asked you if your workers get housing on the farm.
Sure. I have one employee, Roberto, who's been with me for 11 years, and he and I were really the team until just 2 years ago, when he was going to leave the next coming season. And so I realized I need to hire 2 people to replace Roberto, because he's amazing. There's no one like Roberto. So I did. I hired 2 folks, but then Roberto decided to stay on anyway. And so it was kind of suddenly we had this labor pool like we'd never had before. It also coincided with COVID and the farm stand going online, and just incredible demand for produce, period, because of COVID, for local food. And so it ended up being a really good thing that I had 2 more people on the team, and they have all stayed with me now for 2 years. So that somehow now we've just evolved into this new crew structure where there's 4 of us full on through the peak of our season, and then the 3 of them help me through the winter on a part-time basis. And then we have some other part-time folks as well who run our farm stand, people who do a combination of just like jumping in on high labor crops like beans and peas and strawberries, and then maybe we'll do some childcare also. So it's, you know, people wear a lot of hats on the farm. But yeah, our core crew is the four of us.
I'm starting with the last question I see first. I'll work back up. So we have a handful of questions. Narendra Varma, who, have you met Narendra?
We haven't met in person, but we know of each other through a mutual friend. Yeah.
Okay, so for those on the call, Narendra is in Sherwood, Oregon, which is maybe 15 miles south of Portland. So not very close to Zoe, but in the same state.
Yeah.
So Narendra asks, are you paying yourself for taking a profit distribution from the business that is above minimum? So he's saying, are you paying yourself above minimum wage is the basic question. Are you getting above minimum wage?
Sorry about that. There's all kinds of things happening in my house right now. Yes, we are. Everyone's making more than minimum wage on the farm. So Roberto makes almost $20 an hour. He's been here for 11 years, like I said, and is irreplaceable. My newer crew make 15. And then I sort of take what's left at the end of the day and invest most of it back into the farm. So I'm certainly, living my life and, not getting rich, but
however, I do happen to know that you're not struggling, but wondering a little bit about health insurance.
Yes.
So let's be real on this and just tell people just so they hear that part.
Yeah. Woody and I were talking earlier about some of the bigger topics, societal topics really, but that have a real bearing on the viability of farming. One of them being health insurance. So I don't have health insurance, which is always, concerning at times. We have a joke in our family that if you need stitches, you better need them when you're in Mexico, not here at home. And, I worry about college for my kids. I don't have retirement investments, so I've never overcome that 403B experience and have not been willing to invest in the stock market. And so, yeah, there's certain insecurities that I feel financially, while at the same time feeling very rich, as far as the life that I get to live and the food I get to eat and the place I get to spend my day. And a comfortable home and, a great community. So I don't know, there's sort of the grown-up topics of the future that can feel concerning. And I guess are things that I continue to try to figure out, like how can I save money and invest it in something that I feel 100% good about, so that it might.
Including, we've had discussions in the past about, you wish you could find a way to invest in your local food system because it's something you feel passionately about, you believe in it, something about. There's no real vehicles for you to do it. So somebody asked, David Fisher who I think is on Maui. David, that must be why the word Maui is after your name, right? Are you covering your lease? Are land values high where you are? Just asking to say something about your lease costs and just land values.
Yeah. So my lease is paid to my mom. So it's an inside deal. It's affordable. It hasn't gone up ever. It's not really reflecting probably market costs. But it's also hard to find comparables around here because no one is doing the kind of farming we're doing in this area. Most of the land base is dedicated to livestock production or cranberries. And so sort of diversified high value row cropping like we're doing is you have to go over to the Willamette Valley or the Rogue Valley to find farms doing the same kind of thing. So yeah, when I've asked around locally, rental, land lease is not particularly expensive in our area. But I think it's just because people have a notion of the only thing you can do with it is run cattle or make a cranberry bog, neither of which are super high return typically. But buying land where we are is becoming more and more impossible unless you're wealthy. I think the combination of climate change is driving a lot of climate refugees our way. There's all kinds of people who are working remotely because we have Wi-Fi now. And so COVID has put all kinds of remote workers in new places, and our area is one of them. And it tends to be that, people are coming here with, as retirees with plenty of money or still working with plenty of money and can easily inflate the land values around here really quickly. And I've seen that happen firsthand across the street, literally in our own little neighborhood, in the last couple of years alone. So it's worrisome for sure for anyone who doesn't have secure land tenure and wants to produce something on land. It's hard to imagine how they will get in. And I think it's worse in other parts of the state where there's even more population pressure at this point.
So that's, of course, one of the big systemic imponderables, the price of land. And if we want to try to imagine a meaningful upswing in the number of farms that try to emulate what Zoe is doing around the country, to the extent that there could actually be meaningful amounts of local and regional food produced, that was within shouting distance of those markets. The land thing is still this huge imponderable, for all the work of Land Trust and the American Farm Land Trust, whatever, we still haven't put a dent in that question. And obviously we're not going to solve that either. We being those of us on the call and Beetcoin and slow money and whatnot. But at least we're making a little, what to me feels like a pure shot. We're trying to organize small groups of people. Hopefully they'll become medium-sized groups of people over time. Very gradually, these pools of capital will grow over many years and be able to start doing some stuff on the land piece. But it's going to take a time for our resources to get enough to even to do our own little piece on there. But the bigger thing is getting groups of people focused on this, pooling their energy and time and some money to begin kind of staying focused on this problem and thinking about it long term. So Zoe, a few hard asses on the call. By the way, I was biting my, when have you seen a PowerPoint with that many horses' asses in it? Okay, I just had to say that. We do have some horses' asses on the call. I happen to know them. Maybe there's more than just the ones I know. I won't call them out. I won't call them out, Michael Cantor. But there are a few people on the call who were not completely satisfied with your answer on the wage question, not in a horrible way, but they just said, could you just say a little more, like, they want to know how you are surviving. So if you just want to say a little bit more, you sort of said, I take whatever's left at the end. I don't want to make you, there's like a little propriety thing here of what you can be comfortable how you answer it.
No, I'm perfectly.
Just say a little bit more to people about that piece.
Yeah, I think it's important for anyone certainly who thinks they might want to get into farming and is trying to figure out how it's going to pencil out, but also for the world to understand that the first 10 years of starting up my business, I had zero profit. So everything plowed back into the farm. I took, let's see, at some point, I can't remember what year it was, maybe 5 or 6 years ago, the farm switched from being just an LLC to an LLC that elects to be treated as an S Corp. And so at that point, I became an employee of myself and started pulling a salary. So I get paid $1,500 a month gross. That's my salary. But I should say that the farm as a business covers a lot of my life expenses. Like all the horse stuff is a write-off. I can write my dog food off because my dog hunts mice in the field. When I drive my truck for farm use, I can pay myself back for that mileage. And my whole world does really revolve around the farm. It's very rare that I am out on some purpose that is not farm related. So tax-wise, that, creates a place where a lot of my life is paid for by the farm. I mean, I can't write off my food. I can't write off my gas, all of that. But many expenses are paid for by the farm. So when I consider my income and the $1,500 paycheck or, gross, the $1,200 gross or net that comes into my bank account each month, a lot of the other things that I had to pay for throughout the month have already been paid for by the farm. So that's one thing. And then about at the 10-year mark, the farm actually started to be profitable because I wasn't having to plow all of it back in for building greenhouses and irrigation systems and barns and sheds and buying equipment and all of that. And so last year was the first year where at the end of the year, when all was said and done, there was about $50,000 in the bank that I didn't have a place to reinvest into the farm. There wasn't a need. We didn't have any major mechanical catastrophes, pumps burning up and vans breaking down and all the things that seem to happen in the course of a regular season. Plus COVID was our best, 2020 was our best year financially because so many people were staying away from grocery stores and wanting to buy food locally. So it ended up being our most profitable year ever. And that money went into a savings account. And is sitting there wishing that it had some great place to get invested that would feel great through and through for me. I have a pretty high bar. I acknowledge, like I am not going to sell myself out when it comes to investing what little capital I might have earned through a lot of hard work, and to, put it into sort of a fuzzy, not quite transparent stock fund, or I don't know what, it just doesn't feel right. So at this point, I'm not being a very wise investor probably, but I'm hoping that as I continue to do research, I can put that somewhere that's impactful and might yield 3 or 4% back into my pocket someday. Is that clear enough?
I don't see anybody piling on that question more in the chat room. Here's someone. So obviously people are very curious about this. So here's the one that just came in and said, you mentioned 350,000 gross. I'm curious about where the expenses are. You kind of answered that in what you just said. Is there anything else you want to say about that? I think you kind of answered that.
Labor is our hugest expense. That tends to be true on all organic farms because it's labor intensive. And the kind of food that we're harvesting is not something that you can get a robot to do for you. They've been trying to invent a robot in California that can pick a ripe strawberry, and they can't get it done. So they just mangle them, they squish them, they pick the wrong color. It's like, it actually is highly skilled work. And I don't think that that's acknowledged very often. They think of farm work as low skill labor. But what I ask my crew to do is highly skilled. I need a certain quality. I demand, a certain aesthetic and consistency and things that takes quite a while to train people to do. So labor is a big one. And then there's, costs have been going up pretty steadily the last few years in particular, but we have about a $6,000 soil amendment bill every year. That's all of our kelp and azomite and Pro Natural, which is our nitrogen supplement that we use. All of our seeds are certified organic. We usually spend at least that much on seeds each year. I haven't finished doing my QuickBooks because it all gets pushed off until this time of year. But
Zoe, you might want to just mention that study you did. Was it with OSU or something? I forget who you did it with.
Yeah. I was part of a cohort of farmers that was piloting the first ever cost study calculator that was developed at Oregon Tilth and Oregon State University. And basically it was an in-depth project where we did time studies on every single activity on the farm, from bunching kale to planting seeding a flat of lettuce seeds, to how many times you water that flat, to how long does it take you to transplant it in the field, and then how many times do you irrigate it and weed it, and then how long to pick it and wash it and pack it. So we have thousands and thousands of data points and time studies on all of the activities on the farm, at which point you can enter all of that data into this calculator and calculate your true cost of production for that crop, for that sales channel at that price you're selling it. And so we did it for all 100 whatever crops for all 3 sales channels, which was kind of an insane endeavor. It took 3 or 4 years. But what it showed us was truly not just like, I think this is making money, but it showed us if it was or not. And the good news is that all of our crops were in the black. So we didn't have any that were running in the red. And that was great news for tons of reasons, but it also then helped us kind of look at the entire list and understand, well, if we sell beets bunched versus bulk, then they're this much more profitable. Or if we raise the price here, you can play with all the variables. And so it's an amazing tool to really help you hone in on how to dial it up just so that your farm can be as profitable as possible. But for us too, I was talking to Woody about this earlier. It's, you know, it's not just about how much you charge, but it's actually how you run your farm. And so in our case, we love a tidy, organized, tight ship. And the farm, it looks like that when you drive by. It's, you know, it's not a mess. We put a lot of stake in how it looks, but that also means how it runs, because when things are organized, you know where to find the tool. You can get things done much more efficiently. We're pretty huge subscribers to the lean farm approach, which ultimately at the end of the day really gives you a greater level of efficiency, and I think contributes enormously to your profitability. So
all right, so just in the interest of time, because we're coming close to the end of the hour, we have one more question on money, and then we have a question on farm practices. So Howard Fisher is asking a question about money. He asked, do you think because there aren't other farms doing what you're doing in your neighborhood, that allows you to have more profitability than you otherwise would? Which ties, you didn't actually quite get to the thing of how much you charge for your food. So why don't you just address that at the same time?
yeah, sure. I mean, I'm sure it would make a difference because our market, our production is really scaled to the size of our market. And there aren't that many people here where we live. I mean, I live in a town of 300. The town to the south of us has a couple thousand, the town to the north, a couple more thousand. And then there's people scattered up the creeks and in the woods. And it's enough, like there's enough people out there that really want to support us that we sell every stick of food that we harvest. But if there was another farm on the scene, you know, I'm sure it would take some of the business, and whether it just means more people would want more food and it would all buoy us all up, it might, who knows. We sometimes feel sad at the lack of farm community where we are, because most of my colleagues and peers are in the Willamette Valley and the Rogue Valley, elsewhere where there's, you know, more robust farming communities doing row cropping like we are. But I also know that the price of our food is sometimes lower than it is in the grocery store. I always go on these little prowling spy missions if I'm in a supermarket, and I'm often amazed to see the prices that people are paying, or maybe not paying. Maybe that's why they don't want to buy vegetables, because the cauliflower is $7 a pound and it's a 2-pound cauliflower, and who's going to drop $14 on that head of cauliflower? I'm not sure, but I know that we're selling our cauliflower for $5 a head. And so I think the fact that people can get it direct from the farm means we cut out that middleman and we put in our pocket what we need, but the consumer also gets it for a lot less than they might at the supermarket.
I'm going to jump in, Zoe, just because of the time. There's so many issues you touched on there that are worthy of much more discussion, but I just wanted to there was one question about farm practices. Let me see. And the question is, are they permanent beds? So the question is permanent beds, ? Or tractor till the field first to sow cover crop and build new beds each year?
Build new beds each year. Yeah, we don't do permanent beds except in our perennial zones. So we have asparagus, we have artichokes, we have orchard, dahlias. All of that is permanent and just gets treated in a permaculture kind of way with mulch and compost and a lot of weeding. But the rest of the farm that's annual production goes into cover crop in the fall, grows a big, thick, rich, robust crop of cover crop, and then that gets worked back in the spring. And we start with a blank canvas at that point.
All right, great. So we're a few minutes before the hour. I'm just going to stick to, yes, Kyle.
I had a question come in directly to me that is a question that you should probably answer, because I don't think you really touched on this before. It was from Trisha S. The question is, how does a group apply to be a soil group? Does the local nonprofit need to be US based? So you might want to just
perfect. So stay on. Whoever asked that, was that the woman who's in Costa Rica? Did I catch that right? Am I connecting the right dots? But whoever that was, hang on, and I'll answer it in a second, because my thought was that I would just stay on after the hour, and if there were specific questions of that sort, how-to questions, how is this working? What about this? What about the other thing? We would have a chance to talk about that. So I'll come back to that in a sec. That's a perfect segue. I just want to say, while everyone is still on, we were up to about 66 people at one point. We have 60 now still. Thank you so much. Zoe, you're amazing. I knew you were amazing before this call. I think you're more amazing now, if that's possible. I mean, congratulations on doing it, doing it with intelligence and grace and grit and all the other things that you do. Our country and the world would be a lot better off if there were a lot more people doing what you're doing. And not to say that it's easy to replicate, but let's just try to make it happen however we can. So the call to action is donate to Beetcoin. No amount is too small. $1 a month, $5 once, whatever you can afford. We're trying to begin generating a flow of capital from a large number of small donors. It's going to take some time. It's going to take us sharing it with our friends. I forgot to say, and I forgot to double check right before we get on, since last month, I believe we have, it actually started a month before that. So over the last couple of months, something like 55 people have donated around $12,000 of Beetcoin to Beetcoin so far. So we're just starting in amounts ranging from a few bucks to someone did 5,000. Someone on this call did 5,000. But no amount is too small. I can't keep, people kind of think about investing and it's slow money. Maybe it's only for angel investors. No, Beetcoin is for a large number of small donors. And so please click, donate whatever you can. And the goal is to grow a flow of capital that we will use to support the existing 0% loan groups and start new ones in as many places as we can, which leads to the question the woman asked about starting one outside of the country. I'll come back to that in a second. Go to the site, share the site with people. We're trying to build something here. Was that a good enough call to action? We just did an action. You just did an action. We're connecting. We're using some technology to substitute for getting together in person. We had some large slow money groups around the meetings around the country in the past. I don't know if we'll ever do them again, but let's try to make these online events warm, informative, regular. I know you're not going to come on every time. That's fine. People will cycle through. But we thought if we did a couple of months and people just kind of got used to them, if we can get this kind of a group on every 2 weeks, I'd be ecstatic. That'd be great. We'll just see what happens. If it's too much, we'll maybe go to once a month at some point. We'll just see what happens. And I will circulate a program of the rest of the events for like the first half of the year meeting. I'll line up people. I can't promise they'll all be as good as Zoe, but one of the beauties of the slow money movement has been we've connected a lot of great people who are doing a lot of great things. And so hopefully over the arc of it, there'll be a lot of sharing that will be done that will be inspiring and informative. So I'll be circulating something soon that will put